I'm so glad to be back with you. It's wonderful to see all of you. We're going to sing together and invite folks in. Now let us sing. This song has two parts. Anthony will sing one, I'll sing the other, and you can pick whichever part you want to sing or change your mind 100 times during the song. So let us begin. Rise in body or spirit. Everyone, and welcome to our service. Whether you're here with us on Zoom or you're right here in the sanctuary, we are glad you're here. I'm the Reverend Lucy Bunch, happy to be back today from a short vacation and absolutely happy to be serving as one of the ministers of this congregation. Today's service is part of our sermon series titled Finding Our Way to the Future, the Purpose and Promise of Unitarian Universalism. Reverend Roger will be preaching on moments of courage in UU history and our future. If you'd like to follow what's happening in the service, there should be an order of service on the back table. For those of you at home, you can click on the link in the chat box. We also have our blue sheet, which is the calendar of weekly events and activities, and that will also be clickable online. We invite you to explore all the ways that we live out our mission, which says, we come together to deepen our lives and be a force for healing in the world. If you're new to us, we're very glad that you came. We want to extend a special welcome to you. If you have a chance, please fill out a newcomer card at the welcome table. And if you're online, there's going to be a link in the chat to our online newcomer form that you can fill out. We'd love to be able to send you our weekly message and have a chance to get to know you better. After the service today is our congregational meeting. There's two every year, and this is our fall meeting. It will begin shortly after the service. If you're on Zoom, please stay with us. And if you're here in person, please grab a cup of coffee or on the patio or a beverage and come back in to join us. Everyone is welcome. I also want to tell you about a few other things that are happening in the coming weeks. Marilyn Reynolds, there's Marilyn Reynolds, who's our guest worship associate today, is having a book launch celebration next Saturday at 4. I'm sure you'll love to talk to Marilyn and hear some snippets from her book, Over 80 Reflections on Aging. Yes. Oh, I got it right. So please join us next Saturday at 4. Also, the artwork will be coming down this week, and if it doesn't have a red dot on it, it means you can own it. And 30% of the proceeds go to the church. There's a listing on the back wall that will tell you. This is art done by members of our congregation, and there's some really beautiful pieces there. I encourage you to check it out. Finally, I want to tell you, our Soul Matters groups kicked off this month, and if you missed out or you weren't really up for a twice a month for 8 months commitment, there's an open group that's starting this Wednesday. It will meet on the second and fourth Wednesdays of the month. And it's in our regular Zoom space. You can find it right on the front page of our website. So join me for the Small Matters small group. We'd love to have all of you there with us. Finally, I want to tell you we're gearing up and excited about our annual service auction fundraiser on November 12th, a Saturday evening. Tickets for the dinner are on sale now through October 31st. There's a limited number of seats, and if you've come before, you're going to want to come again because the food is so good, and if you haven't come, you're going to want to come and find out how good the food is. We're also taking donations of service items, and there'll be a table out on the patio for those of you who have an idea about something you'd like to donate. They call themselves auction consultants. And I think you can buy tickets at that table, but you'll find out when you go to that table. You folks online, there's a link right on the front page that will get you to the auction site with all the information that you need. So let's all take a moment now to check our cell phones. Make sure that they're not going to make noises during the service. And those of you at home, I encourage you to turn your phone off or turn it face down so that you are not distracted by it during the service. Let us begin. Where do we come from? What are we? Where are we going? Where do we come from? What are we? Where are we going? Where do we come from? What are we? Where are we going? Where do we come from? What are we? Where are we going? Where do we come from? Where are we going?
Good morning. It's good to be with all of you on this Sunday morning, whether you're on Zoom or whether you're here in the sanctuary on this day of our congregational meeting and this day before the Festival of Diwali, the Festival of Lights, celebrated by the Hindu tradition as well as people who are in the Jain and Sikh traditions. Our lighting for the chalice, our words for the chalice lighting today are words for Diwali, and they were written by the Reverend Abhi Janamanchi, our friend who is serving as minister at the Cedar Lane UU Church in Bethesda, Maryland. And I will read where it says leader, and then please respond with the words that say congregation for these words. May the light from our chalice lead us.
And from bondage to freedom.
Let us rededicate ourselves before this light.
To affirm and promote truth, wisdom, love, and freedom, today and in the days to come. I'm headed over to room 7-8. I wonder if there are kids who are also going to come join me and come to that room as well. You got to put one foot in front of the other and lead with love. Put one foot in front of the other and lead with love. You got to put one foot in front of the other and lead with love. Put one foot in front of the other and lead with love. You got to put one foot in front of the other and lead with love. Put one foot in front of the other.
community is strengthened by the sharing of joys and sorrows among us. On the first Sunday of every month, we have a time when you can light a candle and write on a card the joys and sorrows that you would like Roger or I to share with the congregation. And every week, you can go online and let us know what's on your heart by a link that you can find on the weekly message right around the description of the services. So today, a couple of our members of our community have things that they'd like me to share with you. Doris Simonis shares this morning that her sister, Louise Gober-Smith, died yesterday at her home near Houston. We send Doris and her family our love and condolences. Judy Lane would like to share with all of us that her friend Laura, after 9 months flat on her back, has been able to walk and take a shower with some help. She has appreciated our prayers and our encouraging thoughts. Let us offer our prayers, celebrations, and encouragement to all of those who have a joy or sorrow this morning, whether spoken or those that remain in our hearts. This week, millions of Hindus around the world will be celebrating Diwali, the festival of lights, and one of the most important holidays in Hinduism. It celebrates light and the triumph of good over evil. And among the many traditions that Hindus honor during this time is the worship of the goddess Lakshmi. Lakshmi is celebrated as a goddess of wealth, but what she represents is far more than material wealth. Her 4 hands, wouldn't you love to have 4 hands? Her 4 hands represent material well-being, mortality, love, and liberation. These 4 aspects are inseparable in Lakshmi and in our appreciation of her. That is, morality, well-being, love, and liberation cannot be separated. One must accompany the others to realize our true potential. So this morning, let us open our hearts to a prayer to Lakshmi, written by Shaylee Gupta Barnes. By opening our hearts and listening with care, we honor those of the Hindu tradition on this day of celebration. This prayer uses the words Om Shanti. Om is a Hindu concept for the oneness of everything. We actually have an Om symbol on the path leading up to the front door, celebrating that sense of oneness. Shanti is a word that means peace. A prayer for Diwali. Goddess, born from the struggle between good and evil, guide us toward the light. In a world where plenty is possible, let us end hunger, thirst, and homelessness. In your nurturing hands, let us seek refuge from want, fear, and violence. With your grace, let our world be reborn in your image, where all needs are met, where morality and love are abundant, and whereby we are free. Om Jai Lakshmi. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. And now let us take a moment for the prayers in our own hearts. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. That's the melody of the beautiful hymn, We Would Be One. Each month at our service on our theme of finding our way to the future, we want to feature an iconic UU hymn and provide some background on the origin and meaning. We Would Be One is a beloved hymn in UU congregations, including our own. The tune is called Finlandia by the Finnish composer Jean Sibelius. It was written in 1899. The tune was strongly associated with the patriotic movement to separate Finland from Russia. More than 50 years later, the words to the hymn were written by UU minister Samuel Wright, who served many congregations in California, Alaska, Texas, and Oklahoma. He wrote the hymn in honor of the merging of the liberal religious youth of the Unitarians and the Universalists in 1953. Their merger was the model for the merger of the two denominations in 1962. His words: "We would be one in building for tomorrow a nobler world than we have known today. We would be one in searching for that meaning which binds our hearts and points us on our way. As one, we pledge ourselves to greater service. With love and justice, strive to make us free." Let's sing together, We Would Be One.
Good morning. I'm Marilyn Reynolds, a longtime member of this congregation and the most antiquated member of the current Board of Trustees. I'm here because of a chronic weakness to say yes to nearly anything if I'm asked far enough in advance, and months ago I was asked to talk about courage as it relates to Unitarian Universalism and our congregation. Given the courage of the women demonstrators in Iran, of immigrants who have left everything they've ever known and who risked their lives to get here, of men and women braving extreme danger to fight devastating fires here in California and elsewhere, I've been wondering, who am I, living my safe, middle-class, white privileged life, to talk about courage? There are times, though, that just being an everyday person, living an everyday life, takes everyday courage. Over the years in my own life, such times have included situations related to family, work, relationships, public life, caregiving, friendships, financial disaster, and standing up for what I believe to be right. It takes personal courage to get through tough times, and that doesn't happen without some behind-the-scenes encouragement from other sources. These days, many of my personal challenges are a result of being old. For those of us lucky enough to live into our 80s and 90s, we are facing, to borrow a phrase from Lemony Snicket, a series of unfortunate events. I know I've lost credibility with some of my younger family members because of my all too frequent inability to remember the title of the book I'm reading or the author. I know that if I go alone to a dinner at a nice restaurant, I'm likely to be shown to a table in some back corner, likely to be sitting as if invisible while the server takes orders from those who came in after me. None of this is disastrous, but it can be discouraging. What encourages me is being part of a church community that honors UU principles and knowing that the inherent worth and dignity of every person includes me and my contemporaries. We oldsters lose the built-in purposes of our younger years, finding purpose in our work, in raising our kids, in travel, personal development. According to ARP and the Mayo Clinic and a myriad of gerontology experts, having a purpose is essential to healthy aging. That we come here together to deepen our lives and be a force for healing in the world encourages me. I can, in my own small way, be a part of the healing forces of UUSS. But old age is a time of loss, the loss of lifetime friends, either through death or dementia or some other incapacitating condition. I miss the person I've known since childhood, the one who, if I mentioned Spock, would know I was referring to the kindly doctor whose book helped us raise the babies, not to some Star Trek character. We lose traveling companions. We lose the capacity to travel ourselves. The loss of our longtime spouse or partner leaves us unmoored. Some of us, in our 8th or 9th decades, are living alone for the first time in our lives. For too many of our oldsters, such losses lead to isolation and loneliness. The UU 7th principle reminds me that I'm part of the interdependent web of all existence. I'm not isolated. I've said nothing about the losses of mobility or strength or hearing or eyesight, nothing about the final loss that waits around some not too distant corner. Although it doesn't take the same heroic brand of courage that fighting fires or standing up to the morality police does, facing the realities of life as an oldster demand a sort of everyday, ongoing courage. While I'm able, I'll continue to gain encouragement from our UU principles, from inclusion in this congregation, from the opportunity to be a small part of a source for healing in the world. I'd like to end with a poem that challenges us all to appreciate life as it is, to live our lives with courage, even in the midst of loss and grief. The Thing Is, by Ellen Bass. The thing is to love life, to love it even when you have no stomach for it, and everything you've held dear crumbles like burnt paper in your hands, your throat filled with the silt of it. When grief sits with you, its tropical heat thickening the air, heavy as water, more fit for gills than lungs. When grief weights you like your own flesh, only more of it, an obesity of grief, you think, how can a body withstand this? Then you hold life like a face between your palms, a plain face, no charming smile, no violet eyes, and you say, yes, I will take you. I will love you again. Generosity is a spiritual practice. As a congregation, we cultivate this practice by giving away half of our offering donations from every service. We have 12 community partner organizations every year, and after today's congregational meeting, UUSS members will vote to select partners for the next calendar year. For this month of October, our community partner is the Native American Health Center. It is committed to enhancing quality of life by providing a culturally competent, holistic, and patient-centered continuum of care. There are no tribal or ethnic requirements to receive care at the center, which plays a major role as part of the safety net in the Sacramento area, where Medi-Cal benefits leave many people with little or no access to mainstream health care. You can learn more at the center's website. Please give generously to support this important program. As you can see on the slide, you can give online or send a check to UUSS in the mail or text. Whether you're with us online or attending in person, you can set up your phone to contribute by text message now and in the future. Thank you for your support to UUSS and our community partner. Our morning offering will now be given and received. As our ushers bring up our offerings, please join me in reciting the unison response to the offering. May generosity bless our world. May gratitude nourish our spirits.
It's good to see a number of new folks here in the congregation, in the sanctuary, and a number of people who are returning. Welcome back. And if you're on Zoom and you're returning or you're new, it's good to be seen by you. And welcome. Our Soul Matters theme for October is courage, as you heard. In this month, we've talked about practicing everyday courage. We've talked about the courage to stay in conversation with others when we're anxious and in conflict. And today we'll talk about the courage we can find in our UU stories and our UU values. This sermon, as Lucy told you, is part of our series on the future of the Unitarian Universalist movement. This series asks the question, what will we be like in a few generations as UUs, as UU congregations, and as an association of congregations? And what will be demanded of us as congregations and as UUs in this world of ours? I won't get into predicting future events, but it seems likely to me that we will be called again and again to live up to our values. This will require courage in the future as it has in the past and as it does in these times. Consider the values that are reflected in two of our UU principles, affirming the inherent worth and dignity of every person and promoting the freedom of conscience. These values in our tradition go back to Central Europe in the 1500s. In the early decades of the Protestant Reformation, a radical movement rose up in Poland. It was a Unitarian movement, though that name did not exist yet. We now call them the Polish Brethren. They openly rejected the idea that Jesus Christ was equal to God. And for this anti-Trinitarian argument, the Catholic Church, which was dominant, condemned them as heretics. So did the Protestant Calvinist Church once it grew enough to have power in Poland. The Polish Brethren were pacifists and socialists because they wanted to follow the teachings of Christ and live by the model of the early Christian community. They shunned war and opposed executions. They discouraged the accumulation of unnecessary wealth. They were disciplined in their spiritual practices, but they were open in holding their beliefs. To explore and share their beliefs about religion, the Polish Brethren published books, held conferences, wrote papers, and they argued with each other. They debated their different understandings of God and Jesus and what it meant to be human. They discussed religious ethics and social responsibility. Sometimes, in their arguments, they could change each other's minds. But when they couldn't, they disagreed peaceably. They said, and they believed, that faith is a gift of God, and faith is not something to be forced on people or taken away from them. Faith is a gift. The Polish Brethren existed from the middle 1500s into the 1600s. They grew to 125 congregations. A wealthy Polish noblewoman had Unitarian beliefs, and her husband was Trinitarian, but she persuaded him to give the Polish Brethren land, and they founded a city on it, a new town where freedom of conscience would be the law. The city grew to nearly 30,000 people. They had a printing press. They established a school which drew many students and scholars, students of religion as well as other subjects. Sadly, the success of this radical religious movement lasted less than a century. The Roman Catholic Church sent the Jesuit order in to organize a campaign against them. Within a few decades, the Polish Brethren lost civil protections, and they suffered harassment and violent mob attacks. Mobs destroyed the printing press and their school. They were banished from the city they had founded, and eventually from all of Poland. Actually, they faced three options in their banishment: leave Poland, stay and renounce their faith, or be killed. Some of them were murdered. Many were poor and they couldn't afford to leave, and they recanted their Unitarian faith. Many fled and lost almost everything except their faith. By 1700, there was no sign of them in Poland or in the countries to which they'd fled. There were signs, however, of their faith. Their ideas endured, thanks to the books and sermons they had printed. These endured because they had established a tradition of dialogue with scholars and ministers and lay people around Europe. Their Unitarian beliefs were spread throughout Europe and from there to other parts of the world. As we face challenges in our 21st century, we will need the courage of the 16th century Unitarians in order to hold fast to our values and to live them out. In our congregations, we will need to continue the practice of curiosity. We will need to stay open to different experiences of life and to varied perspectives on matters that concern us. We will need courage to promote the worth, dignity, freedom, and full flourishing of every person. As we face the future, we also need to be open to creating new and better ways of building community. An example of this comes from a movement in our history called the Iowa Sisterhood, which was a group of women ministers who served liberal churches in the Midwest and the Great Plains. This is the background of their story. When the Unitarian and Universalist movements, which were separate movements but similar, when those movements took root in the northeastern part of this country, it was the late 1700s. In a reflection of the culture of patriarchy in New England society, all of the ministers were white men, and so were the church board members and officers. So were our denominational officials. In the 1880s, around 20 women banded together to serve as Unitarian ministers in congregations on the Great Plains of the United States. In contrast to the old customs of New England, the laws in Iowa and other new states of the frontier gave women domestic rights and a political voice. A shortage of men in the Plains and Midwestern states enabled women to break out of restricted roles and enter the professions: medicine, law, dentistry, and ministry. Back east, many male Unitarian ministers were famous for their oratory. They made once-a-week pulpit appearances, but didn't do much else for the congregation. In contrast, the sisterhood of women were devoted to their congregations and their communities. They went about raising church families all through the week. They went about building a church home and getting involved in the local community. These women organized new congregations. They revived some that had declined. Some were called to serve churches that were already thriving, and the result of all their labors was growth and vitality. Women could not attend the divinity school at Harvard University, where most Unitarian men were trained for the ministry. However, several of the Iowa sisters attended the newer Meadville Theological School in northwestern Pennsylvania. While some of the women weren't academically trained for ministry, they gained practical knowledge as apprentices and assistants to other ministers. As they did this work, they built a network of support to help one another to survive in an isolating and mostly lonely calling. This is in the words of historian Cynthia Grant Tucker. They built connections and they nurtured community. In one another, they could find courage and sustenance for their challenging work. it feels worthwhile to speak some of the names of the Iowa Sisterhood: Mary A. Safford, Eleanor Gordon, Eliza Tupper Wilkes, Carolyn Bartlett Crane, Florence Buck. On the frontier, the women ministers enjoyed a sense of equality and the freedom to serve. However, while attending Unitarian meetings back in Boston, they were treated with open hostility by male ministers. Moreover, the Boston-based administration was patronizing to them and not supportive. The Unitarian headquarters asserted its authority because it wanted to build a manlier ministry. So it did its best to dislodge female clergy from their pulpits while blocking others from joining them in the ministry. As the cities in the Midwest grew and smaller towns declined, some of the women lost their rural base of population. Some of them just grew weary at attempting to rouse their people to be involved in reforms of government and business. Eventually, most of them went on to secular fields of work, like running settlement houses for immigrants and poor people, and organizing for women's voting rights, and advocating for international peace. To understand the extent of the pushback of the denomination on this movement of women in the ministry, consider that from 1871 till 1900, 39 women had been ordained to the Unitarian ministry. However, between 1900 and 1917, the number of women ordained to the Unitarian ministry was 0. However, Clara Cook Helvey was ordained in 1917 after working in other fields and after the death of her husband. She served congregations in West Virginia, Illinois, Massachusetts, and New Hampshire. Of the denomination's lack of support for women clergy, Reverend Helvey wrote, "Of course, a woman gets only the most difficult posts, but this challenge adds zest to the work." In retirement, Helvey compiled biographies of Unitarian and Universalist women ministers who had preceded her. Yet she was an outlier, for there were few other women allowed into the ministry for decades. The male domination of UU ministry did not begin to change until the 1970s and the 1980s, when the energy of the feminist movement brought women into the ministry. Like their sisters of a century earlier, their ministries weren't promoted heavily by the denomination at first, so it was harder to get a good position. Once they did start their ministries, they endured sexist criticism by congregants. At conferences and ministerial gatherings, the women ministers suffered sexual advances by male clergy, by their colleagues, even sexual abuse. Thanks to their courage, thanks to their perseverance, things are much different now in our movement. For more than a decade, women have made up the majority of the ministers in fellowship with our Unitarian Universalist Association. Women fill a majority of our pulpits in UU churches, not to mention serving as chaplains and serving in other ministries. Today, we have a number of ministers who are openly transgender, lesbian, gay, or bisexual. With regard to gender, a number of our ministers identify their gender as non-binary. Over 50 years ago, no UU clergy could be open about any of these identities and get a ministerial job. 40 years ago, only a few congregations had ministers who were openly gay or lesbian. Given the heterosexism that was dominant in our churches and in society back then, the progress that we can now recognize would not have happened without the courage of ministers to be honest and open and to be good allies to other ministers. It also took courage for lay leaders in congregations to live up to their values of equality and fairness, when selecting their ministers. Our denominational staff also provided support. It recommended LGBT clergy to congregations that might not otherwise consider them. It helped lay leaders and church members to understand how bias works and to explore their fears and their concerns as they began a ministerial search process. None of this would have happened without the courage of women ministers from earlier generations in the 1880s, 1890s, and beyond, and in the 1970s, 1980s, and on up until now. I think that the kind of inclusiveness that many of our congregations practice today feel natural to most of us. The ways we create community seem normal. Yet nothing that we accept as normal, reasonable, obvious, or natural in our time was an easy achievement for those who came before us. Courage made it possible. Courage opened the way. Now I have a third and final example from today, from right now, in fact, because Soul Kids is taking place over in the education building. We're using Soul Matters materials written especially for UU Sunday schools. And they follow the same themes that we use in our small groups for adults and that Lucy will use this Wednesday night at the drop-in discussion. Recently, in conversation, a member asked me about the content of our elementary age program of religious education. What makes this kind of education religious? They asked me. It seems that we're not looking at specific theological beliefs or expressions of them. Well, that may be the case, but here's what we do in our Soul Kids Sunday School. Every time we meet, we have rituals of connecting with others, including the chalice lighting and reciting words together, singing and sharing our personal milestones. There is a time for letting go of extra energy and a time for settling down and centering. From the Soul Matters materials, our volunteers choose a story that touches on the monthly theme, and they introduce an activity on the day's topic. Then they say a final blessing and head for the playground, or maybe the labyrinth. The activities and the stories promote compassion, curiosity, mutual respect, belonging, and hospitality, all of which are spiritual themes. The rituals invite us to open up to the Spirit within us and the mystery beyond us. This is how we teach our Unitarian Universalist values, and this is how we learn them. Our values are the fuel for our work to help others and to build a world that is more just and fair. Volunteers do this not only by talking about these values and not only through the stories and activities, but also by the behaviors they model. And I mean behaviors like the simple gift of their presence, their personal presence, the practice of listening, the practice of kindness. No matter the age of people participating in such an exchange, this is how we show love. It's how we create community. It's how we shape our values and share them. I think that being connected in a community is how we find the courage to stay true to our values. I don't know about you, but it's my experience that as we get older, it can seem harder to live up to the values that we claim. It's hard to respond to others with respect all the time, hard to affirm the dignity of and worth of everyone sometimes, even our own dignity and worth sometimes. To question what we've been taught and challenge the systems in which we have lived all of our lives can be uncomfortable if we have thrived at the center of those systems and received privilege from them. If we, on the other hand, have lived at the margins of social structures of race, class, or gender, it can be frightening to challenge them. It calls for courage. Living out the principle of mutual dependence or interdependence with all of existence, including other people, including other beings. Living out this interdependence brings ethical dilemmas, or sometimes just an inconvenience that we must coax ourselves into. It can call for courage, can't it? It is in community where we clarify and reinforce our values. It's where we find courage to live them out. Whether we are 8 or 88, we need encouragement. In a spiritual community like this one, we seek to encourage one another. We start with our simple presence. We carry it on with the practice of listening and gifts of kindness, patience, and appreciation. Let us give thanks for the courage we give and receive and share. Let us give thanks for the courage which brings us here and for the courage we bring in with us. May courage and love be ours now, and may courage and love sustain us long into the future. So may it be. Blessed be, and amen.
Let's rise and sing together the beautiful words of Holly Near, I am willing.
Before us, so lift me up.
As we extinguish the flame, please join me in the words, the unison words. We extinguish this flame, but carry the light, love, and commitment of this gathering into the days to come.
I invite you to reach out to us, reach out to one another, reach out to those at home, and if you're at home, reach out to us with a gesture of blessing, of encouragement, of courage. May you depart in peace and return in joy. For all who see God, may God go with you. For all who embrace life, may life return your affection. And for all who seek a right path, may a way be found and the courage to take it step by step, breath by breath, one day at a time. Blessed be. Amen.